Hello, everyone. I am your host, Kelly Blackman, and this is How to Win at Everything. And I have my wonderful guest here, Karishma Patel Buford. She is the Chief People Officer at OpLoans, one of the fastest growing fintech companies in the country. So she has a lot of information to give us as far as leadership. Hello, Karishma. Good to see you this evening.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Kelly.
All right, I'm gonna play us in with my cheesy intro, and we're gonna start off with that as soon as I can find it. There it is.
Have you ever wondered why you struggle to find success or fulfillment or lasting happiness? It's probably because your default wiring is set to lose. The How to Win at Everything podcast looks at real people who have struggled with the same insecurities, fears, doubts, and expectations and found a way to succeed. Why? Their brains are rewired for success. We dive into their thought patterns to show you how to rewire your own brain to win at everything.
All right. We are back. And again, Karishma, thank you so much for spending an hour with us this evening. I want to not take up too much of your time, so I want to jump right on in with the good stuff. You guys, Karishma has she has 47 degrees. Don't worry about what each one are, what each one of these is, but she is probably one of the best people I've ever met when it comes to leadership. As far as not only talking about leadership, but as far as being a leader and empowering other leaders. So she's gonna, Karishma, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you to this point as a CPO.
Yeah, so share a little bit about my career.
Yes.
And my experiences.
And your journey there.
Yes, lots of twists and turns. So, grew up as an only child in an Indian family. And when you do that, you got three paths: physician, lawyer, engineer. And clearly I broke the mold. So, went to undergrad as a biomedical engineer, 2 years of that until I discovered I really can't do this. I can't, my heart is not in engineering. I decided to go down the path of psychology. Loved to understand how people thought, what makes them click, how do you change? Went down that path and ended up going to graduate school for clinical psychology. Got my degree in clinical psychology and was doing my internship and postdoc. Loved the therapy aspect in my internship. And then I was rolling into my postdoc. I started losing patience for my patients. And I thought, what's going on? I started seeing physicians and academic faculty and realized I was doing executive coaching versus therapy. Lots of quick change, right? I was working with the chief of surgery 3 sessions and everything was turned around. And I thought, how do I do this? How do I apply my clinical skills to this kind of fast-paced change? And so entered the business world and joined a global management consulting company to do executive coaching and leadership development, all things talent management, multiple cities and multiple companies and industries I consulted with until I joined a 100,000 person defense company based in the UK, but worked out of Washington, D.C. And supported their U.S. subsidiary in terms of talent management. Left there as the head of talent management for the 30,000 employee subsidiary.
And that was a global position, right?
Yeah, it was a global position. Traveled to Oman and Australia and Switzerland. But I didn't have a global team. So I was looking for actually having global scope and a global team. So I moved from DC to Chicago with my family and joined Groupon at a low point because I love challenges and turnaround situations. So joined the team there as the head of global talent development. 30 days in, I was handed inclusion and diversity. And my team was spread out across 15 countries. Cool. And my last year I had global recruiting, which was a great experience that got me ready for this role. at Op Loans, and I was ready to take my career to the next level. And it was the first time that I was able to build on a strong foundation with a company that was growing versus a turnaround situation that I was inheriting. So that is what made it exciting. And now, almost 2 years later, built my team from 3 to it'll be over 20 next year, and built all the foundation and pillars of HR at Op Loans, and it's been a ride.
Now, I want to jump right into this because there are a few things you mentioned that I think are pillars of what we're talking about when we talk about leadership. So the first thing is you had the balls. Let's just say balls. You had the balls to say to your parents, traditional Indian parents, I'm guessing,
Yes.
hey, I'm going in a different direction. So to get a little bit of perspective first on you, what gave you the courage to even decide to look at something different?
What a great question, Kelly. Courage is exactly the right word. I mean, there were some sleepless nights.
Yeah.
Preparing for this conversation. Again, only child, lots of pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Lots of expectations of multiple children rolled into one.
That's right. That's right. You got to do it for everyone.
Exactly. So I will tell you, it was a really, really difficult moment. And I had to write my parents a letter.
Were they still in India?
They were. So I was born in the States.
Okay.
Right? And my dad came here for college. Married very early. My mom was 21. He was 25, right? So came to the States. And so I was born and raised in the US, but they happened to be in India. And I didn't know how to talk to them without using words in a letter, because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to communicate to them that I was deviating so far from this mold and this cultural norm. So I just wrote this letter explaining that I wasn't happy, that my heart wasn't in engineering and my heart wasn't in the path of medicine, which I thought was going to be psychiatry if I did go down that path, but learned it's very much diagnosis medication and not the real human connection that I love. And so I wrote a letter, but you know what, Kelly? The hardest part about that is that I didn't have a plan. I needed to leave the e-school. And then So let me just make sure you started this letter to tell them I'm stopping here, but you didn't tell them what you were doing next. No, I just said I'm going to join the College of Arts and Sciences, take sociology, psychology, and art history, and see what I fall in love with. And so I didn't have a plan at the time, so it was kind of a double whammy.
What do you depend on at that point? Because obviously your heart's not in this, you're not happy. What is in you that says, I have the courage, I have the whatever to not only think this change out, but then the people who give you all your expectations to tell them I'm not doing it, I'm not going through.
So look, I went to 3 different high schools, moved 3 times in high school. And we had to move around quite a bit growing up because of my dad's job and those factors. And I'll tell you what, like taking risks, moving outside of my comfort zone, growing up, having to do that. Like imagine going to 3 different high schools, right? 12th grade, I made a change. 12th grade, I made a change. Your last year in high school. And it forces you to really learn and push yourself and do the things that are hard because you're put into uncomfortable situations again and again. And I think it made me resilient and a risk taker. And I also realized that life is about having your heart in it. And I also saw a lot of friends in the Indian community who decided to go down paths based on their parents' wishes. Yeah. Whether it's marriage or an arranged marriage and marrying who your parents want you to marry. I broke the mold there too. We'll talk about that. Or, going down a career path that doesn't make you happy, and you see the effects of that later. Yeah. And living a life of regret. And I think I think that those early experiences of being pushed out of my comfort zone helped to give me the strength to do that early before it was too late.
So early on, you're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. You guys want to write that down? That's going to be one of these pillars. But now you move into medicine, and you're doing what you think you're going to be doing is going to be psychiatry. There seems like there's another kind of crossroads here, and you have to pivot again and say, no, not psychiatry. I'm into so you get that you're courageous, but where does the mental wherewithal come in that says, oh wait, something's not clicking here, and this human connection is the piece that is pulling at me. So let's start here. How did that first kind of come up in your brain? How did you figure, this human connection is what I really like? Like, how did you know?
I love that question. So I will tell you the moment I knew.
Oh, I like it.
And it was my 4th year at the University of Virginia. And by then, so I left the engineering school my 2nd year. The 3rd year, I moved into the College of Arts and Sciences, as I mentioned. And I fell in love with psychology, the academic aspect, for the reasons that I mentioned. But I needed to combine that with some experience, right? And so 2 experiences. One, I was working at a crisis hotline. And I also did an internship at the outpatient psychiatric unit there at the UVA hospital. Sunday night, my turn to pick up the phone. It was a father on the other end who had a gun in his hand and had just put his children to bed and was sharing with me how his cousin had died in a car accident the week before. And he had just dropped his wife off at the hospital. Oh, wow. Who had attempted to commit suicide as well. Wow. And we talked for a very, very long time. And I talk, and then there's training, but I'm not 21 yet. Right? Oh wow, yeah. So I rely on the crisis hotline training, which is not years of extensive training, but talking to him about his thinking and his feelings and what are motivations and reasons to stay alive, right? And he talked about how his wife loves him but doesn't believe her, right? He talked about how his wife has said, everything that we're in right now, our position is all your fault, right? And but there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, right? So there's a lot of conflict in well, you believe her when she says it's your fault, but you don't believe her when she says she loves you, right? And so finding some disconnects in his thinking, right? And helping see a different perspective, because all of psychology and all of influencing and ultimately all of leadership is about helping people think differently. And so hung up the phone after maybe it was 90 minutes, and you never know. You don't know what happens. You never know what happens. 3 days later, I go to my internship at the hospital. And part of my role there is to do intake interviews, right? And I sit down with this woman who tells me I tried to hurt myself with the intention to kill myself. And all the pain that she's experienced over the last few months. And then she said, and my family's had a hard time. I have 2 kids. My husband's cousin died in a car accident. Oh, wow. Yeah. So you see where this is going, right? This is the wife of the man I spoke to 3 days earlier. And then a few days later, he comes in and he's playing with his children and his wife at the unit. And I was floored because I would have never known, and he didn't do it. And that's when I knew I need to enter this path of helping people think differently. Wow. Talk about being connected with the calling. Wow. That's when I knew it was my calling. Wow. Boy, you almost shut down all the other questions there. I see these questions pop up, but I can't wait to see the comments because I'm not actually seeing them. Oh, here we go. Well, comments. I got it. Yes. First, guys, let me just mention, thank you so much for all the comments.
please keep them coming. And if we have a few minutes, we'll save a few minutes in the end, and you can actually ask Karishma some questions. So thank you so much, and we're going to keep on rolling.
I love this. Perfect.
All right. So we see another, what I would call, pillar or foundational piece of what builds you up, and this is kind of like your superhero origin story as far as I'm concerned, because you get you get this sense of something building to give you what feels like a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, which in the coaching stuff I get to do, a lot of people are lacking that. A lot of people are saying, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go, and all I have are these parental expectations or these outside expectations. And most of us don't have a story where we get to see the happy ending of what we've done. So when it comes to people trying to find their path, particularly when it comes to, most of us are entrepreneurs, we're trying to build something along those lines. What is it that you see or say or recommend to that person to say, hey, this is how you start your journey? This is, they won't have a story where they see the happy ending. So how do they start their journey of figuring out where they should be going or how to get there?
Yeah. So I think it's about finding your passion, right? Finding really, what is it, reflecting and doing some introspection of when in your life do you get most excited? Think about, you have to get a little meta, right? You got to go outside yourself and really sort of look at your experiences in life and think about what really gets you passionate and excited. Yeah. What are the most high moments that you've had in your life, in your career? It's not just about work, right? Because we're human beings, and we're not two different people in our work and career and home life. So thinking about, and really, you're not going to find this particular answer in a book. It's going to come from really looking inward and really understanding when are those moments that you feel incredibly excited, incredibly, meaning and purpose. I think that is really, really important, especially now in today's world. When do you find meaning and purpose? And think about those moments. And they could, some of those moments can be completely outside of work for people. That's why I make people make career switches, right? Because they realize when you're thinking about entrepreneurship, you're thinking about those moments when you felt really excited about your purpose and your meaning. And so it's really asking yourself, what gets you really excited? What define those moments, right? Think about your life defining moments and reflect on that over the last year and 5 years. Write it down, really write it down, and then figure out what's in common. What's in common about all of those moments? If you can think of 3 to 5 moments, if you were going to do a journey line, right? And the journey lines are the peaks and valleys that we all go through in life. What's common about those peaks? And how do you take all those peaks and shape a career out of it? Is the advice I would give.
Well, thank you. I think that's helpful. One of the things that you mentioned is writing things down. I am bugging people all the time to journal, because it is such a good way to get to see. It's almost like having data on yourself. You get to see yourself at different points, different times. So if you journal, you will have a much better chance of really getting to see yourself. Now, I was on a panel earlier today. We were talking about the genius zone. I wasn't really familiar with it, but obviously it's that place where the work you do is so much fun that it's almost like play, and it's intersecting with that thing that makes you feel like you have purpose. So most of us are very disconnected from this, again, because we grew up with all these expectations and outside things that are telling us, hey, this is where we should be, what we should do. Do you have any advice for let's say an aspiring entrepreneur who says, hey, I want to figure out what my thing is? How about to help them get into that zone?
What would I recommend?
Yes, because I'm thinking if you get into that zone, then you actually understand what it looks like to find those little places where you get those happy points.
So this makes me think of, and I'm going to pull up the exact book, but there's a concept in positive psychology called flow. And it's the psychology of an optimal experience and engaging with your everyday life. And I would recommend reading more about flow, because it's exactly what you described, right? Where you get so caught up in something that there's no world around you. That's when you know you're like in love. And what you're doing in the moment. So I would read more about flow and finding flow. There's a book called Finding Flow: The Psychology of Engagement with Everyday Life. There's also a lot around positive psychology and creativity and the role of creativity in flow. This is all of the positive psychologists out there have talked about authentic happiness. And I think that those to me are the foundational elements of entrepreneurship and leadership, right? When you're really understanding what you love and what gives you flow and what gives you happiness, that's the gateway to being a great leader. Because if you don't have that, I think it's hard to give it to others in any way or coach others to get there, right? So you have to find it within yourself. So I would recommend starting with those concepts, understanding them. You'd probably find 100 books if you went on Amazon on this topic.
Okay. Well,
let me recommend one other. Okay. Malcolm Gladwell is one of my favorite authors, and there's a book, both Malcolm Gladwell and Dan Pink. So Malcolm Gladwell talks about, in his book Outliers, about mastery and how you achieve mastery. And I think that's a great topic, as Dan Pink talks about motivation and intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and where you want to achieve mastery and autonomy. So I think those are other ways to explore what drives you. What do you want to gain mastery in? How do you get there? I think those are all those are staples in the world of leadership, and so those are other places to go and seek to understand how to define that path for you.
So for you guys who are taking note, we've now gone through a couple of different foundational pieces, and now we're upon self-awareness. You have to become aware of yourself before you can really push out any real idea, because you're relying on luck or chance or something that really may not get you to where you're going. Now, we're reflecting back to your story, Karishma. So you find this thing, you find like, oh, wow, I'm connected to this thing, to this psychology. I like this people connection. Where do you go next after that?
So then I go to graduate school, right? That was an undergrad. I go to graduate school into clinical psychology, right? So I applied to grad school to get my doctorate in clinical psychology, because I'm thinking I'm going to be a clinician, I'm going to see patients, be a therapist. And then that's when during my internship and then at my postdoc, that's when that impatience thing, like I'm a driver, right?
Yeah.
So ask me what my team says about me. Like, I think the first thing is driver. And I like results and I like to make impact. And the reality is therapy can be years in the making, of course, right? And so that impatience got to me until I started working with, again, academic faculty and physicians, where because of the cognitive resources, right, the personality resources that are available to them, action and change was so quick. And I thought, how do I do this? And how do I do it in a faster paced setting? And so that's when I actually started. I went to a conference. I walked out of that conference with a husband and a job. So I like to be efficient. One of my key strengths is efficiency. So like knock both.
There you go. 2 in 1.
Exactly. And so it was only a 48-hour conference. So, so I switched careers. I went from clinical psychology to what they call IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, right? Which is the study of individuals in organization and leadership. And so this consulting firm, now Korn Ferry, basically what you do is you study leaders. Like I did hundreds and hundreds of leadership assessments to understand what do the best leaders have in common, and then assess them and help companies decide whether they should hire these leaders or not based on our very in-depth, comprehensive assessment. Right. And so that's what I did: leadership development, leadership strategy for 4 years.
Okay. So now I'm sure everyone's going to be in this same place. You work for Korn Ferry, you're doing leadership assessments, you find the things that make people successful at leadership. Go ahead and list them.
Yeah. So what I learned is there are really 4 buckets, and I'm adding a 5th bucket because of my years of experience, but 4 buckets around types of leadership. And those buckets and domains are thought leadership, results leadership, people, personal leadership, and what I'm adding is change leadership, which I think is more critical than ever. And it's an amalgamation of those first 4 domains. Sure. Thought leadership is being strategic and innovative and creative, and results leadership, getting things done through others, and delegation and execution. People leadership, as you would expect, right, is inspiration, collaboration, and coaching. And personal leadership is about the EQ elements: resilience, adaptability, being able to take feedback, and grit. And then change leadership, as you can imagine, are pieces of all of those things combined.
Sure.
And a lot more on the EQ and gaining buy-in and influencing and winning minds and winning hearts. And I think that's what change is, right? It's not just about all the data. It's about winning hearts, because it's the difference between short-term compliance and long-term commitment.
That's right. That's right.
So those are the 5 domains. Now, if you asked me to prioritize further, I certainly would. But those are
well, look, I don't know if you saw Colleen's comment. Like, just get to the point. What are the main leadership traits?
Yep.
Colleen is obviously a results leader here. She wants the results. So yeah, please tell us.
So look, those I wouldn't want to undervalue that those 5 together are what really define the best leaders, right? So the best leaders are going to have. You can't be strong at everything. But you're going to have some real strengths in 3 to 5, if not 4 to 5 of those domains. If we were to drill down on change leadership, I would, in today's environment, I heard a colleague a few weeks ago that I was connecting with say that the 2008 financial crisis was a financial, much more of a financial exercise and experience, and then 2020 is a people crisis. Right, between a global pandemic and mental health at an all-time high in terms of challenges and racial injustice and political divisiveisa, right, and social fill in the blank,
right.
And so it's people, right, and we're like I said before, like, we're human beings that enter the workplace. We don't shut down or shut off.
Yeah, become machines, right.
Exactly. And so if you were to ask me what are the most important traits today, I would say vulnerability, inspiration, resilience, and grit. And a lot of that is about change and personal leadership. It's not just about IQ.
Let me ask you this. How much of this is something that is innate in us, and how much of this can we learn?
Based on my assessments, I think there is, on the thought leadership, there is some innate ability. Your ability to think critically and strategic thinking, connect those dots, sort of what we call in the psych world inductive and deductive reasoning. Some of those things are pretty innate, right? So they're harder to develop. You can only get incremental impact. So that's in the thought leadership bucket. I think the EQ pieces can be developed for sure, but it takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of motivation, a lot of energy. And most leaders may not have all of the above. Most leaders may not have all of the above, because you need a lot of that together to change. These are hard habits, right? You're basically undoing habits. And you have to learn habits. You also have to undo.
Mhm.
learn and unlearn and relearn. And so it is absolutely, because otherwise there wouldn't be executive coaches. I probably wouldn't have the role I have today.
Right.
But it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of energy, and not everyone can do it because it takes an sort of insurmountable amount of self-awareness and vulnerability. And
Yeah.
the ego gets in the way. You know, Freud wasn't kidding. The ego can get in the way.
See, now I'm curious about that because when when I hear your story, and not just your story, but multiple stories, when you start talking about heading on this path, there's a sensibility about you that says, I am willing to pivot and to change gears. And a lot of times I would say for me, my ego has gotten in the way and said, no, I'm good at this and I'm gonna win. So, and this is how I'm measuring success. So I get really narrow tunnel vision and I go after a thing. How much is it possible for you to learn to drop your ego, to be vulnerable, to be open enough with yourself, and to be aware? Like how easy or how hard is it to gain those skills so that you can actually put yourself in a place to choose?
Yeah, it depends on the person.
Mhm.
It depends on the person, on how hard it's going to be. The ego is protective.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's this function that the ego serves, is to protect you from falling apart. And when your ego is bruised, it really hurts. And sometimes people have really strong defenses to protect themselves against hurt. That's what it is. And it, you know, like I said before, it takes a vulnerability to say to yourself, you know, what's the risk if I keep going down this path? Right. Yeah. Take some self-awareness to step outside of yourself and say, okay, I heard this pretty harsh feedback from somebody. I don't believe it. I don't buy it at all. It's them. It's not me.
Right.
And if you stop and ask yourself, what's the risk of not listening to this feedback? And really honestly ask yourself that question and think, what could happen if I ignore this feedback? It forces you to look in the mirror, right, and raise the mirror. And hopefully you have people in your lives who do that. That's really lucky. Like my husband's a psychologist too, so it worked out perfectly because he raises the mirror on me every day, right? And I need that. I might not always like it. I might not always like it, and I won't always. I'll tell you. I mean, he'll be the first one to tell you that when you first do it. I mean, I'm not. You know, office hours are closed. My feedback time is open tomorrow at 9 a.m. That's
right.
People in your life to raise the mirror on you, right? And really ask you what is the risk of ignoring this feedback? What is the risk of letting the ego get in the way? And it takes a certain amount of resilience, emotional resilience, and ego strength to be able to do that.
So, okay, so this kind of brings me into a new place because we talked about your courage to get into these places of being able and willing to pivot and to see things that maybe our egos would stop us from seeing. But the flip side of that is fear. So all of this is based on this idea of not being heard or not or the fear of not living up to someone else's expectations and that sort of thing. So if fear is obviously good for what it's good for, but when it's bad, it's really bad. So when you're talking to someone who's dealing with that kind of fear, or just you for yourself, when that immediate wall comes up that says, nope, not listening to that, how do you recognize that? How do you recognize that that's where you are? Because I got to admit, a lot of times if I'm feeling that, I'm not even talking to somebody else about it enough to let them know to hold the mirror up to me.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to turn it around. How do you know when you're scared? What happens? What are the things that give you a clue into the fact that you're feeling scared?
Well, I mean, obviously I never get that. So that's obviously not a thing for me. I'm never scared.
You better write a book on that, Kelly.
Right.
There's your $1 million idea.
Look, I'll tell you, the first guy that's not scared is going to be the guy who gets eaten by the alligator because you were not paying attention from the last guy. So for me in particular, I happen to have a lot of super judgmental people in my life. So my wife's always like, no, Kelly, you screwed that up. And what I've come to learn, we've been married 18 years. What I've come to learn is that while I can write some of it off as, oh, she's wrong, sometimes she's just not wrong. And after enough time of paying attention to the time she's not wrong, it really does just speak to me like, oh, well, the reality is that when she's angry, she may say this or that, and that may not be something I have to take directly as truth. But some of these times she's just right. She's just right. So my wife, my son, I have a congregation full of people who are going to say, well, based on these Bible learnings and this sort of thing, you should look at it. So I have a lot of people in my world that keep telling me, look back at myself.
Yeah.
Now, before I gained all these people, I would say I have no idea. I was just so strong-willed and so hard-headed that I probably ran into a wall a bunch of times because
Yeah.
I didn't. If
Yeah.
I was afraid, I was angry and defensive and everything.
Well, see that, there you go. So like you have some insight now around how fear played out for you, right? And people who feel fear may turn it inward and it's sadness, or turn it outward and it's anger, right? And so remember, it's an emotion. So you got emotion and you got the intellectual and the logic. And so recognizing that fear is an emotion, and you think about fight or flight, it's a biological response, right? What happens if there's a tiger or a bear in front of you? Fight or flight kicks in, and you have a physiological experience, right? You start heart palpitations, you get really nervous, sweaty, whatever that is. Like there's something that's happening physiologically, because that's how the brain and emotional connection work. So figuring out what is your emotional and physiological sort of outcome of fear is a form of self-awareness. It's an emotion. It might happen in the amygdala, but you experience it, right? You experience just like when you're happy or when you're sad. And so getting really in touch with that, part of that is mindfulness. Part of that is mindfulness, right? It's really important to be aware, because then when you know, once you know, like, you know what, I'm really scared in the moment, you can actually think about what is causing that for me. Like, what am I really afraid of in this moment? What am I worried is going to happen, right? Peeling back the layers. What's going to worry? And if that happens, then what? Worst case scenario, the 5 whys, right? Then what? So you really start thinking, then you can get intellectual because you've identified the emotional experience that's happening. And then you can seek to understand what's going on by peeling back some of those layers and really understanding what's happening. Well, you know what? At the end, I feel like I'm going to get rejected and feel like I failed. Then what? If you fail, then what? Right? And the worst case scenario is rarely what happens.
Nearly as bad,
Or nearly as bad as you think you will be. It's the anticipatory anxiety, right? It's the anticipatory anxiety, and fear is a form of anxiety.
Let me ask you then, so we're again back to the self-awareness. From what you're talking about, paying attention to your physiology, paying attention to yourself, and having that data, that feedback that kind of gives you this information. This sounds a lot like another endorsement for journaling, right? Because if you go at the end of your day and you say, oh, my day was crap because I felt like this, and that, and you look at it a month from now after you've done it multiple times and you see that pattern, this is what the journaling does, right? Yeah.
It can be very cathartic, journaling, right? And looking back, it can really drive gratitude. So there's a lot of data to suggest that if every day you wrote down 3 things that you're grateful for, it could be as small as somebody opening a door for you, or as big as somebody, taking care of your kids or buying you a car, and whatever that is. But that there's a lot of research that says if for 30 days you keep a gratitude journal, it actually makes a sizable impact on your happiness. And so there's something really powerful about journaling, whether it's for mindfulness or for gratitude or for catharsis. But it's a great thing to do. It's creating a habit. So that takes some time and energy and focus too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. You guys got another endorsement here for journaling. So
There you go.
It's not just for teenage girls. Let's lose some of the stereotypes about journaling. Everyone should be doing this. All right. So let's move a little bit further on in your story. So you're in a place now where you realize that this is what you're into. You know that this is what you love.
Yep.
What makes you say, I'm working on this but I needed a global team. I need like what draws you to that? Because that obviously comes with a whole other set of challenges of different cultures and bias and all of that still. So what got you there?
Yeah. Well, what actually literally got me to open the door for Chicago is my husband. So my parents were in Virginia, only child, right? So it was about going back and being close to them when we started our family. And then probably 4 years in, my husband's like, all right, when are we going to be closer to my family who lives in Kansas City?
Nice.
Well, we're not going to move to Kansas City, but let's look at Chicago. Really close and great city. And so looked at opportunities, and Groupon stood out for me because, you know, fastest growing company at its time of all time. That was, you know, 5 years after I had joined, but it was a cool, like Groupon there was a darling, you know, it was a darling in Chicago. And I loved the fact that the stock was the lowest it's ever been, because I love challenges and I love learning from difficult moments and difficult roles. It was a broken global team. Nobody trusted each other. I had my team spread out between Singapore and Switzerland and Brazil and the US. And I love that. That was a great challenge. And I love global.
I like that.
Yeah. And it was and I had already had a wealth of global experiences in my previous company, traveled the globe, had been to 25 countries in that 2 or 3 year period. And now having global scope, because there is differences, right? There are differences across culture in terms of values and norms, and like learning to adapt how you connect and collaborate with those in the UK versus Australia versus Oman, right? Versus the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia versus the US. I mean, I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by the idea of learning who people are individually, and then cultural aspects that are layered on top of that. So to me, it was amazing.
Now, I think that this is another one of those pieces where I want to drill down on this a little bit, because what you're saying sounds like a worst nightmare to a lot of people. It's like, oh, so I have to be the head of a people team, or I'm recruiting, or there's all of this dysfunction, and there's all of these different cultures, and that right there sounds like a nightmare. But so you're obviously attracted to being uncomfortable. You know, or at the very least, you're very accepting of being uncomfortable, because I got to figure that Groupon is kind of in crisis mode if the stock is at the lowest point it's been, and they're saying, hey, we need you to come in and be a part of turning this around.
Right.
First off, for you personally, why does that thrill you? Why is that a happy place for you?
I think, Kelly, like, I just really thrive on challenges. Like, I just love taking, I mean, it's so funny. Like, it's so big. It comes so naturally. So now you're
right. It feels like normal.
Yeah. It's forcing me to think about, like, my husband also like kind of makes fun of me, because he's like, okay, what's next? Like, in the sense of your next challenge, and you're not in terms of next career, but next, like, okay, like you're just ready for the next thing. Like, you're not satiated, right? In terms of challenges and impact. And like, if I at any point feel like I'm not making a difference, right? Or I can't make a significant difference, like, that's my engagement. I need to be in a place and an environment where I can make big changes and big impact. And so it's a lot easier when you don't have to grow and build something from the ground up, or you don't have to fix something that's broken. It is a lot easier, right? You think about entrepreneurship. I mean, you're building from the ground up. It's like one of the hardest things you could possibly do. And so some people thrive on security. I thrive on variety, and thrive on really taking really tough challenges, navigating them, and seeing the success on the other side.
So let me ask you this then: is it is it the variety that's fun, or is it the variety that's more fun, or is it the winning at the end?
Ooh, that's a great question to reflect on. I
Yeah.
love winning, but so I learned that the true definition of competition is that when you're really driven by competition, that you need to see others lose in order to feel like you win. That's the
Hmm.
true, like, sort of clinical definition of it. That I don't
Hmm.
feel that way. I
Right.
feel like you can win when you think about zero-sum game. Like, you can win, others can win too. You don't
Hmm.
have to be the only one, even in the same game, right? And so
Hmm.
I love winning in the sense of, um, you know, we don't have to be the only one that's best, but we are the best, right? We like
Okay.
so this
Okay.
idea of being the best at some of the things that you decide are your core competencies, your core strengths, and the thing, and you can't be everything. Okay, that's why so many companies try to do everything and try to make so many things their core competency, and you have to get focus, right? As an entrepreneur too, don't try to do too much. Really focus on your niche.
Hmm.
Focus on what makes you special, what differentiates you, what's going to give you a competitive advantage. And sometimes I think I've seen entrepreneurs or leaders or companies fail because they are trying to be the best at everything. But really realizing, where can I win? And where can I win? In some ways, be the best or be among the best. Um, I love that. But it does come with prioritizing and having
Hmm.
focus. It can't be all of the above. Can't be all of the above.
Okay, I think I hadn't planned on that question. I just thought that was interesting because it's such a it's it's like the typical thing is that we run from pain, we run toward pleasure, that sort of thing, and to see that this is something that so many people equate to pain, and the fact that you are so like I mean, like your face lit up, you're just like super happy about it. I just think that's something to go into. I'm going to ask you more about this one later.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Let me start here. DJ jumped in with the question about security versus variety. So please explain more. DJ, let me ask you: can you be a little bit more specific what you're asking about, or you just want her to define the difference in the terms? So I guess we'll go on while we wait for DJ to clue us in.
Yeah. And I can shed some light, right? We all have different values and things that we're driven by, right? And
Hmm.
some people are driven by security and stability. And I have friends who've been at the same company for 10 or 15 years. The most I've ever been at one company or done the same thing is 4 years, right? And it doesn't mean that's my term limit. It just means, like, I am ready for the next challenge around that time. That's what my past would predict, that I'd be
Sure.
ready for the next challenge. And so variety to me is more like, and variety is part of it, but it doesn't actually capture the entire
It
value.
doesn't. Yeah.
And because it's the variety plus challenge plus impact.
Okay. Okay. I was
And
gonna.
sometimes when you're with a company for 10 or 15 years, that impact just, like, it decreases because you've done all that front end, right? Like, mostly in
Yep.
your trajectory as a career, you make the most impact at the beginning, right?
Hmm.
And then it's like more of that upside down funnel. So that's what I meant when I talked about security and sort of variety. Hopefully that helps.
Right. DJ, if you have any more questions about, oh, I'm sorry. She says, go deeper on your meaning. Okay. Okay. So actually, I think this is good because I also wanted to go a little bit deeper on this too.
Yeah.
When you mention impact, and I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, they're taught, find a place where you can make the impact, and that's what should be what you go after. Now, obviously, I think that that's maybe not the best idea because you have to have a passion for it too, and it should be something that you feel important, feel is important. But for
Right.
you, when you start talking about that variety, can you talk a little bit more about? Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what drives you to want that variety, or what drives you to want those challenges?
I'm not sure there's anything more I could add to. People are driven by different things, right? People have different
Okay.
motivators and different values, and values are based on some innate temperament plus nature and nurture, and the combination of everything you get, and that's how you shape your values and your worldview, right? And we're
Yeah.
all different. We're all driven by different things, and that's just like
Sure.
That is my value. And I think that the lesson there is live a life that aligns with your values. And part of that is the career you choose, right? And people who have been in careers that doesn't align with their values, like me when I was an engineer, a little bit of that, and not a lot, but a little bit of that when I was doing therapy, right? It didn't capture all my values around speed and results. And I got frustrated, right? I was like, no, get out of that relationship. It's abusive. Like, that's not how it works, right? If you could tell somebody to do that then you'd be done. But no, 2 years later, you're still in that relationship. So just find meaning in your life in every domain, right? And the meaning comes from really understanding what is important to you and what your values are. And it's different for everyone. It's different. But there is something like people don't change their values too often unless they have a traumatic experience or a major life event.
So, okay, I was gonna, so first off, I just want to make a point really quickly that this goes back to the idea of being self-aware, and you guys, you can always use some of the tools that Karishma spoke about earlier about figuring out and finding out which things that you have or that you do that are those high points for you. So that'll help you to really kind of figure out what it is for you and what it takes for you. I do want to make mention of the fact, though, that I wanted to ask the question about values. So you say they don't change much over time, but there has to be some portion of it that allows us to differentiate. I got a kid now. I have a wife now. I obviously want more security than I did when I was 18. So how do we take that into consideration when we're trying to plan out or map out who I am now and what I want to do or be as a leader for the future?
Yeah. So I would think marriage and having a child are major life events, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Those count as major life events that if you had done a values exercise, right? And you could Google, personal values, and you'll get a bunch of hits around, here's a list of 50 values, pick the 5 that are most important to you. Like there's a ton out there on that. And if you had done that exercise, Kelly, before you got married,
right,
or you had a child, they would probably look different. Maybe 3 of those would be the same and 2 would be different. Totally makes sense, right? So that's why it's not, after about 18, your personality is pretty defined.
Sure.
And so there are going to be some core values that are not going to just go away because of major life events. They're going to stay with you, and some will evolve. And so it's not a once in a lifetime exercise. It's an exercise that probably evolves with key job changes, key life events. If I did the same thing, it would be before kids and after kids. There would be certain difference, but there would be definitely things like risk that would stay in common that obviously haven't changed, right? After I've become a mother. So I think that's how and it's about maintaining that self-awareness, right? And taking initiative.
So 1 or 2 more things I want to get to. We're almost up on time. It goes so fast.
Yes, totally.
I want to get this show is called How to Win at Everything. And one of the key pieces of this is that we all define winning so differently, or we can define winning so much differently than one another. How do you define winning, or how should we use winning? How can we define it so that everyone understands how to kind of justify it and make it their own?
I think the thing that comes up for me is being the best at something. Really being the best, because that's a form of impact. And I think everything is also, like, if you focus on mastering something and being the best or one of the best, to me, the rest comes. It always has in my career.
Okay.
It always has in my career. So I think that's what, it's not just about dollars, and that's important. That's one way to measure success.
Right.
But being the best. And so that, whether it's a coach, right, as an executive coach, really helping people change tough behaviors and change mindsets, or as a leader, helping a team, achieve extraordinary results that they wouldn't have been able to do without you, right? or a company understanding what their core competence is and doubling down on that to be better than anyone else. I think those are the ways I think about winning, and it's subjective and it's situational and it's contextual. Yeah. But it's not just a dollars thing, right? It's sometimes it's not what you can measure. Sometimes winning is the intangible and what you can't measure. And like winning, I felt like I won in that moment when I saw the man I talked to who had a gun in his hand come in and spend time with his family and know that he was still alive, and that felt like a winning moment to me. And I can't measure it in terms of dollars, right?
Definitely. I want to get just another thing or two in. So when we talk about leadership, well, let me start here. Can you give me a definition of leadership, and give me a definition so that we can separate leadership from maybe management or managing people?
Yeah. So I think of managing as managing process and projects and tasks. And I think of leadership as people, right? I think of what I said earlier as winning minds and winning hearts. And all the domains that I talked about are a culmination of those leadership skills. Winning minds through really good influencing, knowing what to say when, and when to bring in data, and when to adapt and show more supportive style, right? And empathy and vulnerability and connection. And so winning minds and winning hearts, like people can respect you as a leader because you're super, super smart and have great IQ. But if you don't have the EQ side of that, I think it's that combination of IQ and EQ that's really a critical combination in the right balance that differentiates managers from leaders.
Thank you. That powerful. I would say that's very powerful stuff. Last thing I want to put to you, and this is going to be our abstract question, and I like to get this from almost all my guests. At the end of your life, how do you know if you won?
My goodness. I can't imagine not winning. I'm already winning. I can't, I have won. I have won because I've taken chances, and I'm so blessed, and I have a winning life. I really can't imagine otherwise. And no matter what happens from here on out, you have so much control over how you see your life, right? And how you interpret it, and what you can't control your emotions, but you can control what you do with them. And I think the finding and bringing the right people in my life is just as much about sort of the fate and what's not in your control as what is in my control. And control what you can and let go of what you can't, right? That's an important part of resilience and grit and mindset. So, and it's not, look, I can't give you metrics, Kelly.
Right. If you've done 3 of these, then
strong gut feeling that I really have a winning life, and I'm really fortunate.
Let me just say, I do think that it's a very interesting thing that you say that, because most people, when I ask them about that question, people say, I feel like I've won if I've impacted other people. And I always think that's such an odd thing, because what if you don't know that, what if you impacted 1 billion people, but you just don't know? No one ever came. Did your life suck? Were you not happy with it? So I always think that it's such an odd thing to have an outside thing kind of be the rating of how your life was. So I think it is really very interesting and very rare that you find somebody who's saying, 1, I have won, and 2, the reason that I've won is because the way I'm living it. So I think that is beautiful.
Thank you.
All right.
And you hear my kids screaming, ready for me to put them to bed.
Yes. So it's
another example of winning right there. They want me to put them to bed.
It sounds like they win. Win. Karishma, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This has been really great. Obviously, I love and I admire you. I think so highly of you. And to me, the fact that when you are able to put all of this, you put a little bit of time away to come on and give us a little bit of your knowledge, your wisdom, is the best thing in the world to me.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. It was an honor. I really appreciate it, and I loved sharing my story. I hope it was helpful for others as well.
Definitely. And to all the people who showed up tonight, I want to thank all of you for your comments. I
Thank
want to
you.
thank you so much for your participation. It was some great stuff. Kenny, thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I am very suave, I guess. Thank you.
Love it.
Karishma, hold on for me one sec. I'm going to see you backstage, and I'm going to play us out with my nice cheesy outro.
Perfect.
Ta-da!